Hello, this is Hilary Robertson. Welcome to the latest episode of Harmonious World. This time I'm joined by acclaimed guitarist Todd Mosby. Todd's latest album is called Aerial Views. It's the third in a series of concept albums based on the elements, and this one focuses on air. The album's produced by the legendary Will Ackerman and Tom Eaton and features a cast of world-class musicians: bassist Tony Levin, drummer Jerry Marotta, percussionist Jeff Haynes, multi-instrumentalist Premick Tubbs on soprano saxophone, and Eaton himself playing the Fender Rhodes keyboard. Mosby's fascination with Indian music is evident in this album. Each of the tracks focuses on the album's overt theme with various combinations of instruments. What's particularly fascinating about this album is that it started from 500 initial ideas, some of which were complete, some were incomplete. And then Mosby honed that down to 32 tunes, which he submitted to Will Ackerman. And they were then further pruned down to the final selection. And every composition was written specifically for this album. Some of the tunes were even toured in the last series of concerts in January 2020. I began this recording with the opening of Earth and Sky, and I hope you enjoy listening to our conversation. Hi.
Oh, hey, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Good.
Welcome to Harmonious World. And, the concept of this is that if people share what they're good at, the world would be a much better place. And I think more than anything, we need that right now.
I like that. Yeah.
So can you talk to me a bit more about Aerial Views? And so it's the third in a sequence of albums.
Yeah, they're based on the elements. So the first one was based on, mountains and the land or earth. The second one was based on water, the ocean. And actually it goes into a story of a musical story of Atlantis and a journey outward from that continent or mythical land or whatever. And then then this one is based on air, or the element of air. And so all the titles on all the songs for all the albums have been wrapped around that. The music line has been developed around that. So it's kind of like a tone poem in that sense, or a program music in that sense, if you want to call it like that.
Yeah.
Kind of like what Debussy, back in the day, program music around the early late 1800s, early 1900s to maybe 1930 or thereabouts. Program music was very big. So that's where you base music on a theme and just kind of develop it like that. So you go to hear a concert and it's, everything is geared towards that storyline. Even I wrote a bunch of haikus as well that accompany them. And the Aerial Views one I didn't, but the other two have short haiku that accompany each tune as well for added description and storyline.
Brilliant. And there's something about perspective, isn't there, with this album, that it feels like there's a different way of looking at things.
Oh, absolutely. When you're above ground, your vision, obviously you've got a broader sense. Your vision and viewpoint is expanded immensely, as opposed to being on the ground, and actually digging your hands in the dirt. I mean, you can go inward equally as deep, but when you're looking above, you see more of the macro cosm of things, as opposed to a microcosmic view. So yeah, and earth and air actually is probably the most important element. I mean, you can live a few days or weeks without water, a few weeks without food, but air, 8 minutes, 6 minutes, you're gone. So it's one of the very important element that most people take for granted, I think.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So I'd love to talk about your relationship with Indian music. Where did this sort of fascination with Indian music, where did that come from?
It started when I was probably about 13. There was a store not far from where I lived, and we used to go, as a kid on the weekends, go into the town, and you could walk around. And for kids, they didn't have outdoor malls then, so our indoor malls, but they had little townships, and we would go into this township nearby our home and just hang out. And there was this one store that he was an importer. He had a whole bunch of stuff from India, basically, and I'd go in, and he'd have all this really cool incense. He'd have incense burning and all these cool books and music playing. And so I would save my allowance and rifle through his Indian collection and pick up music, by tabla players, sarenge players, sitar players. And so that was my first introduction to that. And I started reading Cahill Gilbran, getting into Eastern philosophy, prayer, meditation, that kind of stuff. Fast forward about, 10, 20, 30 years, about 20 years or 25 years. And then I was working at Washington University doing dance class accompaniment for modern dance. And a teacher, Imrat Khan, was, coming into town to teach at the university. So I was able to monitor a class there. And I always had a deep interest in Indian music. And I monitored his class and learned so much in that one semester about music than I had up until that point. I thought, oh my gosh. So I wanted to study with him to get more access to his knowledge base. And I just approached him afterward and said, can I start studying privately with you? He said, sure. I said I didn't want to play sitar. I wanted to play guitar because, at the time I was earning my living as a guitarist. And I that's my instrument. I love the sound of it. And I knew that I could adapt it to whatever. And so did Imrat. So that started that journey of formal study, which lasted approximately 13 years.
I found it interesting that you use elements of Indian music, but in a very kind of Western guitar.
Yeah. Okay. So what happened was about 7 years into my studies, he had totally helped me with my technique, my right hand, because I always had problems with that. So and I was also running sound for Indian concerts in St. Louis as well. I had a sound system, and for some reason I started getting hired to do sound. So I saw a whole bunch of live Indian music, in St. Louis, because they had a really good, they still do, Indian community here. So I went to Imrat and said, if I want to get into the deeper aspects of this music, I need to understand the sympathetics. Took a while. We found a tuning for the guitar that would cross over, from Western to Eastern. And I used that for a number of years. I actually did a tour with Russia with this dance company. I was performing, also helping them out with sound and audio and stuff. Anyway, I said, look, I need to be able to access the sympathetics on the instrument in order to get into the more deeper philosophical aspects of the music and sonic aspects, because without that's what makes the music. I mean, essentially, the instrument fires the sympathetic strings. And so what that means is it creates this natural harmony, and also spurs the rag on as you create, melodies based on the rag. The sympathetic strings start firing, and that it's, one kind of feeds the other. So I had a guitar luthier that I knew in Chicago. He was already doing designs, so I had him come to St. Louis, and then Imrat, myself, and him got together, and we started working on prototypes for this instrument. I'm into about prototype number 7 now, and I finally gotten to the point where I love the sound. It's working for me really well. The sound is amazing. I found a tuning that works amazingly. It's a very inspirational tuning, and it's an acoustic instrument. archtop instrument. And then I also have an electric instrument that I use as well. That was designed back in 2004, and that's been a very successful design, solid body. And both of those sound amazingly together, especially on this recording. There's about 4 tunes where I use both of them in conjunction, and it's a really nice blend.
Yeah, I mean, overall, the sound it's really interesting, and it is really ethereal. There is something very air-like about it, about the blend of sounds.
Yeah, I think Tom and Will saw this thing, and they just they jumped all over it. They loved how it sounded, how it played. It's the only instrument like that. And Tom, the engineer and producer, Tom Eaton, really knows how to mic that thing now to really get it to sound amazing. And so does Will too. I mean, Will understands the sound of it now, and we've been using it very successfully over the last 3 recordings I did with them. That's Eagle Mountain, Open Waters, and this one, Aerial Views.
Right. And I saw something that said that you went into the recording process with hundreds of sort of finished and unfinished ideas, and you had to hone them down.
Yeah, that's the normal process. Like usually right after recording, I'll just have a spur of things for the next recording. And this particular one, little bits of ideas. I'm not high tech at all when it comes to this. I used to be, but I hang a little microphone, a little tape recorder like this, a little handheld digital recorder. And I've got my looping stuff. Like this is my looping board. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh yeah.
And then my processors, and this is my electric rig here. And I have a little sound system.
Right.
And I play it back. I jam to it, or I come up with a nice idea, or chord progression usually. And then I run it into my looper if I like it. I start usually within about 2 or 3 passes. I come up with a melody, and then I wind up putting that on my recorder and filing it until I need it. And then 1 or 2 years down the road, I'll wind up rifling through the ones that I think would work for a series of recordings, and contact Will and say I'm ready to go again. And then we go through the process. I whittle it down to about maybe 30 finished pieces. Some are already finished, some need to be worked on, and then I send that to Will, and Will listens to it, gives me feedback, and then we whittle it down again to maybe 15. I take his recommendations and then send that back to him, and then we whittle it down to about 12. And then we're ready to set a record date and track date and start like that.
Right. And then you get everybody else involved.
Yes. So what happens then is Will and Tom like to go with having a really strong guitar basic track. So what I'll do is I'll flesh out the form, make sure everything's there. So I just record the guitar, along with a click or maybe a drum machine. And then, they set all the mics for the major guitar parts. That goes down first. And then I'll do a scratch melody. But usually my scratch melodies wind up being, finished. They like them a lot. So this particular one, though, I mean, we wound up working about 12 to 13-hour days, about 4 days straight, because that was the window we had. I mean, it was a drill. We usually have a little bit more time to spend tracking stuff, but this particular round went, we had to move very quick because we had basically a window of about a month to get a finished product done, whereas normally it's about 6 months to a year. So because the CV kind of compressed everything, and there was a lot of firsts in this one. So we track at Will's in Vermont, right outside Brattleboro, for the basics. And then I found a studio up in Woodstock, New York, called Dreamland Studios. And Jerry Marotta, he's a drummer. He manages it. And so we wound up tracking and doing all the overdubs there. I wanted to do bass and drums and percussion together. because I wanted that feel. Will's place really can't accommodate that, and that's not really how he operates anyway. So this is a little bit of a push outside of his realm. We wound up in Dreamland Studios, and I called Tony Levin. That's Will's, first line bass player, and he lived right outside of that, where right, the studio is right down his off his doorstep, basically. So when Jerry heard that Tony was on it, then those two had worked together with, oh my God, I mean, Paul McCartney, and I mean, their list of hours of tracking together and everything else, and touring together with, every major artist you could think of. I think Jerry may have started with Jackson Browne back, when he started touring, but he wound up with Peter Gabriel, and both of them did a lot of Peter Gabriel stuff and Hall and Oates. Yeah, they've got the personnel on here is amazing. They're all top flight. They got Michael Manring, did some tracks on bass. He's who I normally tour with, and then I brought my singer and pianist up, Lola Christine. She's from St. Louis, but is based in Los Angeles. Pramik Tubbs was on woodwinds, and he even played lap steel on this. Great lap steel player and sax player. And then Jeff Haynes was on percussion. Jeff toured with Regina Carter, Pat Metheny, Al Jarreau. He was the main guy for him for years, percussionist for him. The Pramik Tubbs, he's Santana. He started with John McLaughlin, actually. So
I knew it's really weird, because on Aether, the solo he does on that's a beautiful
yeah.
And there was something that triggered something, and I think I've probably heard something of what he's done with Santana.
Yeah, he's a mainstay New York guy, and he's toured with, he tours with Sting, that Rainforest thing when he was doing that. He tours with James Taylor all the time. He goes a lot. He's a great player, a great person too.
Yeah. So how has lockdown been for you? The whole process of the pandemic and
well, I would say 2020, January, February, I was out on the road, and we were on the whole ensemble. I have an ensemble called New Horizons Ensemble that I tour with to play this music. We were playing music, some of the music from this new album, and also music from Open Waters and Eagle Mountain. We were on a very nice upward trajectory playing performing arts centers across the US, and then it got shut. That basically halted by February. We were done with our tour anyway, so by March then things were not looking good. And then there was talk, because I go to conferences a lot for performing arts centers, to pick up gigs, and that's where my agent is. And so I showcase there. Those were all online last year. They're all going to be online again this year. So that was a very big hit, and all the venues basically closed down for all of 2020. They didn't really know how to handle it, and a lot of venues actually, were shuttered. Their doors just closed, and there was some funding available for them, but I don't know how many of them survived. And right now they're still in lockdown, and it pushed the whole schedule back 2 years. Okay, because you work 2 years in advance,
right?
So if I book a show, concert, it's usually 2 years in advance from the date, 1.5 to 2 years. That's the cycle they're on. So now everything is backed up to 2022. It wouldn't be about till 2022, 2024 before I would start seeing concerts again. I need to find a new place to create new venues anyway. I've always done that in the past. So, there's always an audience. So in that sense, the lockdown has affected me, but in my business, but for me personally, I still have maintained the freedoms that I had.
Okay, well, thank you so much. It's been really interesting to talk to you and to sort of do a dive into the album. Really, it's been great. I thought I'd play a bit from Earth and Sky.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite ones on the piece, and that one uses the electric Indian guitar, the acoustic Indian guitar, and also my jazz guitar as well. So the melody is layered with two different guitars on there. That compositionally is a pretty tricky piece, form wise, because I wanted to get earth, the melody is down low, and then the sky aspect is up high, the melody goes up high, same melody. It's a little, with guitar doubling, and I had to have a nice bridge in between that, and that was the tricky part, to make it sound natural, because it's an odd set of measures. And but that, I love that tune. It's probably my favorite off the album. Okay.
So can you talk to me about where the inspiration came from for Aether?
That came from actually Naima.
Yeah.
John Coltrane's Naima. I wanted to do an acoustic version of that, very slow, laid back, pensive, thoughtful. And so I used all major seven. I was interpreting it as major seven chords, because Michael Mannering, he did the bass line part on it. He calls up and goes, "Hey Todd, I'm going to use this tune for my one of my analysis. I've never heard a tune that uses so many minor chords in a row like that." I go, "Oh, that's interesting," because I was thinking major seven. But anyway, Jeff Haynes on percussion did. He spent so much time on that. He loved that tune, and so he really shines. And if you're listening to a really good sound system, oh my God, the bottom end of that drum he has, it'll really test your sound system and the quality of it. Because I got a reviewer wrote me and said, "Oh my God," he used that tune as an example, that he was able to actually finally hear the low end on his speakers, and it's like, what the heck? So there's a lot of layers to this recording wise that you can dive in deep. And and then Will Ackerman is playing guitar on it as well. It features him as well. So they loved that. They really had fun playing it.
Yeah, it's a lovely tune. Great tune.
Actually, in general, if you write music that musicians, the ones you hire, are going to enjoy playing on, I mean, that's half the battle of getting a decent recording. I found, if they dig the music, then it's going to be, they'll bring, their best to it. And everybody brought about 120%. I mean, Jerry Marotta, he was in there listening to it, "Oh no, wait, I can do this. I mean, they just went over the top on it. I don't know if it's because nobody had played for a while, because everybody was, all the gigs were canceled and stuff, but it helps. It was a lot of fun, and it was a well-needed break for everybody. So that makes this recording pretty special, because everybody hadn't been playing for a while because of that lockdown thing. So.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much, Todd. It's been great.
Okay, thanks, Hillary.
So I hope you enjoyed that conversation, and it was great to talk to Todd specifically about Aether, which I'm going to play out with now. So meanwhile, thank you so much for joining me once again on Harmonious World, and get in touch with me on social media. All the links are in the show notes. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.